Hey everybody, welcome to Woodworking for Mere Mortals live show. I hope you all had a good week and are ready for the weekend. Are you building anything, or is it just too hot to build stuff? It's been hot here. We've been having an unusually hot summer in Northern California. I mentioned to some of you before that we're thinking about getting an air conditioning. We haven't made that leap yet, but I think this is the year that we're finally going to do it. I know people think, how do you live without an air conditioning? But it usually doesn't get super hot up here where I live. Anyways, a couple of things I wanted to address. First of all, if you're watching this now, you already know you're watching a live stream. If you're watching this in the future, hello future people. This is also a recording of a live stream. This is a replay because there was a number of people who left comments about the replay and were saying, this is not woodworking, this is not, what is this? I don't understand it. And it was just like mind-blowing to them. So if you're not really into just watching a guy standing around just talking, you might want to just leave right now because this probably won't be for you. It is just me blabbering on. Okay, so you can go. Good, now they're gone. We can talk about them behind their backs. I'm glad the rest of you are here and know what this is all about. This week I'm answering every woodworking question ever asked, ever. All of them. I'm just going to get them all in one shot so nobody ever has to ask questions again. Well, at least I'll get some of them, I think. And if I don't know the answer to a question, I'll just make something up. That's how I roll. Let's see, a couple of housekeeping stuff here. I want to thank all of you who downloaded my free guide to setting up your woodworking shop for under $1,000 with brand new tools. Okay, that guide also has advice on how you can set up a shop with like no money, you know, and where to look for those tools. Anyways, it's just a handy little guide. And all of you who downloaded that, thank you. That you can, if you still want to do that, you can download that. It's over at theweekendwoodworker.com. And by doing that, you're also signing up for my mailing list, so you'll be updated on everything that's happening with that course. And when it goes live, when it launches, you'll be the first to know, and you'll be able to get on board with that. I'm really excited about it. As I keep mentioning, it's just taking up so much of my time right now working on that. I'm on my second project of that course right now. The first project is actually a bonus project, and we got it edited. Like the first half of it is, it's gonna be divided up into, so all the projects you can do in a weekend. You know, that's the whole point of it. And it's for like brand new woodworkers who don't know anything, and other woodworkers who just want to kind of refine their skills. So it's like 2 days. So the first day of the first video we've got edited, and it's like 20 minutes jam-packed with good stuff. So there's going to be really detailed videos in this course. That's my plug for the weekendwoodworker.com. And also, those of you who got my list earlier last week, you may have noticed, or you probably saw, that I had to send out a retraction on one of the tools I recommended, and it was the Ryobi table saw. A lot of you were saying, whoa, that Ryobi table saw is really not that good. So I started experimenting with it, testing it. You were right. This thing has some problems. The rip fence it's workable, but it's so flimsy. It's just, for a new woodworker, I don't feel right about recommending that. I could use it because I've used fences like that before, and it's just a matter of measuring from each side of the blade every time and it's just, it's a hassle. So and the miter slots, it has weird miter slots in it. It has those kind of T-shaped ones that, so I just thought this is probably not a good recommendation. So I switched it to a rigid saw, which a lot of people recommended, and it's still inexpensive. It's like $100 more, but on my tool list, it still comes in at under $1,000 because I eliminated the router, because in the Weekend Woodworker course, you're not going to need the router. So it still comes in. Actually, it might even be a little bit cheaper now. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm going to be getting that saw. I bought it last week. I'll be getting that on Tuesday so I can start testing out that rigid saw. It looks really good. and it has kind of standard slots, and all the Q's and A's I've been reading about it are really praising that saw. And I'll let you know about that, and I'll tune in next week and I'll give you a full report on it. Oh, also about these live streams, a lot of you have been asking me why I don't schedule these, because a lot of live streams on YouTube, you know, they say scheduled coming in 2 days or whenever, and it's because I use the mobile live app just on my phone. And I don't think there's a way to schedule these. I don't know. Eventually I may go to the actual live streaming app where I have to bring in a real camera and everything, but unless maybe I could do that with my phone. I'm not sure. I have to look into that, because I like using my phone because I can take it off my tripod and move it around the shop, and it makes it more interactive, I think, than just standing here. Okay. So that's all the blah, 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 blah. Oh, Maker's Care too. There's one more plug I had to give for Maker's Care. Don't forget, Maker's Care is starting up in September. Go to the website. They just got it all updated, and you can watch a little video with me talking about Maker's Care. Makerscare.org. We're going to be raising funds for Children's Miracle Network hospitals this year. Okay, I'm going to start answering every woodworking question ever asked ever, to the best of my abilities. Hopefully I won't have to make up answers, but we'll see. I'm going to start with Patreon. People over on Patreon had some good questions. I'll start with Jim. The first question I'm starting with isn't a woodworking question, but Jim wants to know what happened to my TARDIS and do I ever use it. The TARDIS is in my tool shed out back, and no, I never use it, so I'm just stuck in this time frame, I guess. I don't know what I'm going to do with that TARDIS. I've been thinking about just giving it away. Somebody who could use it. Okay, let's try to... I got a lot of these, so I'm going to try to keep this pace going. Daniel asks, how much wood... Another non-woodworking question. How much wood can a woodchuck chuck? 42. And Michael said he was going to ask the same question. So there you go. The answer is always 42. And if anybody knows that reference... leave it in the chat. Okay, and then Jim also asked, tiny shop, thinking of building a flip table for 2 tools, yay or nay? I've seen people who do this. You know, if you don't know, these are those tables where it's a stand like I have on my miter saw, except it flips, so you can have one tool on one side and it's like the other, the whole thing flips around. I have never done that before. I'm not sure how practical that would be. Maybe if it was maybe like 2 sanders or something. The problem with that is it sort of has me start thinking a little bit like a shopsmith, where it gets a little bit difficult to go from tool to tool in your workflow. So if I was using one tool, I would hate to have to flip it over, unless it was really quick and easy to flip over and then use that tool and then have to flip back. It just seems a problem. One thing that sounds kind of cool though is to make a table that flips and just is a tabletop on one side. But then you'd have to clear off all your junk every time you wanted to use it. I think that like a sander would be a good option for one of those flippy-do tool tables. Jonathan Mora once asks, what type of joinery do you think is stronger, pocket joints or dowels? Probably dowels, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Pocket holes, pocket screws, pocket hole joinery is just so much easier to use. Dowel joinery, even with the jigs you can get for those, is kind of tricky. I think it's hard to get those lined up perfectly. But yeah, they're probably a little bit stronger. It's also kind of comes to the question is how much strength do you need on a project? As woodworkers, I see that a lot of us who tend to think that everything we build has to just be bulletproof, so strong. It's not always the case. Think about the use of the project. I would say where you really want to be concerned is, say, making a chair or something that people are going to sit in. You know, obviously you don't want it falling apart. That would not be, that wouldn't be good to sit on. And Jonathan also asked, what joinery would you recommend for plywood? Anything you use on solid wood, I think you can pretty much use for plywood too. Troy asks, how does one decide what wood to use for specific projects? Plywood versus solid, expensive versus not. I think that second part of your question is really your answer there. It really comes down to price, how much you're willing to spend. Most of it has to do with aesthetics, what you want your finished piece to look like. Because I've seen beautiful pine furniture, even though that's a soft wood and it's the least expensive wood. There's actually a gallery here in Marin that just sells nothing but pine furniture, and it's expensive to buy that stuff, but it's made with cheap wood, but it looks beautiful. So to me, I don't think it matters. I think that there are times when you would want a hardwood, especially if you're making, say, like a mallet or something that you're gonna, is gonna take a lot of use, then maybe use some hard maple. But I think mostly it comes down to what you can afford and what you like the look of. And maybe how easy it is to use too. Pine is pretty easy to cut and to mill, and some of the hardwoods might be a little more difficult. Okay, I'm gonna try to pick this up a little bit more. And then Troy also asked, expensive blades and sharpen or cheaper ones and replace? I use cheap blades and I just replace them. I don't probably replace them often enough, but they seem to last a long time, especially for hobbyists who aren't going to be using it every single day of their lives. Same question for bits and drill bits and router bits, he asked. Yeah, I always, again, I just kind of go for the least expensive versions of both of those. It's kind of it's one of those questions that a lot of people are totally on the other side. They're like, no, you spend a lot of money, get something real quality, and then you'll appreciate it in the long run. I don't know. Ron asks, what's your go-to finish for small and or intricate projects where French polish is just not appropriate? Spray lacquer. Anything that is intricate, you spray it, it's so much easier than trying to get into all of those nooks and crannies. And I like to use spray lacquer for just about everything. AMD Ham, also known as Doc Ham, asks, questions. We've got the questions. Okay. If I only had enough space for one power tool, which would I choose and why? As far as a stationary tool, I would choose the table saw. You can do just about everything on a table saw. If you have a real limited space, go with a jigsaw. It's amazing what you can build with a jigsaw. I think a jigsaw is really an underappreciated tool. And for like $50, you can pick up a jigsaw and build stuff. Oh, let's see, there's more to his question here. Woodworking is truly challenging when you have a very limited space. Yeah, it is a problem when you have a space. That's one of the things I really want to address in my weekend woodworker course, is dealing with limited space, working in a garage, keeping your tools mobile, that sort of thing. And if I decide to go with a new Woodworking for Mere Mortals logo sign, what would you like it to be? Simple, sophisticated, manly, generic, colorful, monotone, carved? He's talking about that logo, because in Mere Minutes, my vlog I had last week, I mentioned that some people said I should upgrade this thing because it looked kind of cheesy there. But, now that I think about it, I think that it's just got that charm, the spray paint on there. It was just kind of a spur of the moment thing. I spray painted that on there when I colored all of these spaces purple, because when I took down when I put up those clamp racks, I pulled the old ones off the wall and I just left the spots where they were painted empty, and people were complaining that I should have painted those. So I painted those, but I just painted them purple. And at the same time, I did the spray paint on the logo. Okay, well, I got a lot of questions here. Going through them quickly. I keep saying that, but I'm not really going through them that quickly. I probably should have read through some of these before I'm doing this. Okay, Corey asks how to choose nails and screws, the length, what type to use, basically how to choose which type of joinery to use. Well, joinery would be different than the fasteners, like screws and nails. Nails rarely use in woodworking. Sometimes I use the nail gun to put brads, and that's usually just to hold something together while it's being glued up. Screws, I have become a complete convert to these kind of screws. These are this brand is GRK fasteners, but what they are is they've got the star head. I'm not even sure. Yeah, star drive head. But they all, when you buy them, let me open it up. Don't worry about having the driver, because when you buy them, they come with a little driver bit. They cost more. This is like one of the exceptions to my rule of try to buy things as inexpensively as possible. Once I started using these, I'm willing to pay the extra money for them. Driving with a Phillips screw is maddening after using these. The bit doesn't come out, it's just easy to use. Also, don't forget if you're in Canada, because I know anybody who's listening in Canada will instantly say Robertson screws. You got to use Robertson screws because those are the square head ones. So, and those work out great too. That's what Craig uses on their screws, is those square head ones. And again, the bit doesn't fall out or strip or anything like that. Okay. What type of vise should I choose, and is it a tool that gets used much? Let me show you my vise. Okay, let me flip this around. Bloop. And, okay. This is my vise. I've had this vise for years. It is like really cheap one. There is nothing fancy about this vise. And no, I really don't use it very often. It comes down to what kind of woodworking you want to do, what kind of woodworker you are. If you're going to be doing like hand-cut dovetails, it's really nice to have something to support that wood while you're cutting it. But for me, I just don't use a vise very often. Probably what I use it for the most is if I need to cut like maybe a screw or something. I need to cut it down smaller with a hacksaw. I might put it in there, but not very often do I use that. Okay, Dan asks, router bits. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts and experience on bit selection. My video from 6 years ago, has my opinions changed? No. There are 70-bit sets for under $150 and 4-bit sets for over $100. Is there really that big of a difference in the end result? Maybe. It depends upon how fussy you are, I guess. I get these cheap bits. You can get like these. I got this at Home Depot. This is a set of just straight bits, and it's real inexpensive. I don't remember how that was, maybe $30 or something. And I've got these also are round over bits. My advice in buying drill or router bits is don't get those multi-pack 150 ones, because you won't really use those. The only router bits really that I use, like 90% of the time, is going to be round over bits to ease over the corners of the sharp edges of things, you know, and straight bits to cut grooves or to cut rabbets, anything like that. So just get like 4 different sizes of straight bits, 4 different sizes of, or not even 4, maybe 2 or 3 sizes of round over bits, like a 1/4 inch, 3/8, and maybe a 1/2 inch round over bit. If you're using metric, you'll have to convert. I'm not sure what those are off the top of my head. That's pretty much it. You know, if you have a special need for a certain router bit, eventually just go buy that one on its own. I've seen these router bits where you get like one router bit for $60, and I think that's crazy. I don't know. You can buy a router for $60. Okay. Jason asks, what's my favorite wood gears project? Matthias, what's my favorite project or video of his? Probably that one where he gets cranky at his audience. I don't know. Okay, Nelson asks, made my first end grain cutting board, gave finished project a few coats of mineral oil. However, now despite repeated wiping, I can't get it to stop feeling slightly oily. Any thoughts? I think you're doing it right. I think it probably should feel a little bit oily. I think there's nothing wrong with that. That won't transfer to your food in any bad way. Michael asks, making do with warped wood. Got some corkscrew-esque 2x2s. You can use warped wood sometimes. Here's a piece from a project. This is a 1x2. Is that what he said? 2x2s, I think. Okay, here's kind of like my rule of thumb. If a board is, there's actually a name for which way it bends. There's like a warp, a twist, I forget what they're all called. But anyways, I call them all warps. If it goes this way, like say like this, I can usually make that work because you can usually kind of force that into position. If it's bending this way, you're gonna have problems. It's probably not worth using. And if it's got a twist in it, I would just throw it out. I don't think it's worth saving. Unless you've got a jointer and a planer, you could straighten it out with that, and you would basically be making it smaller, but you could, I don't know. I wouldn't bother trying to straighten out any kind of twisted board. As someone who, this is from Tommy, as someone who just joined this amazing community, I would love to hear your thoughts on where to begin. I know this has been answered a lot, but I like your approach to woodworking, and I want your thoughts on what type of projects to start with that utilize solid lumber and can help me learn a lot of new techniques. Sign up for the Weekend Woodworker course, which will be coming out this fall. But as far as getting started, I would start with projects that you can easily make in a couple of days, because if you start out with a big project, and just because a big project is big doesn't mean it's going to be any more complicated. You could start with a big project, but it's going to take you longer to build it, and I think that it's more important to have kind of a sense of fulfillment right off the bat, and like, yes, I have made this thing. Look at my thing that I made. And I always tell people, I think one of the best projects to start with is a box, because almost everything in woodworking is kind of based on a box, really. It's just about making right angles and fitting things together. And plus with a box, you can join it together in a lot of different ways. Another good project to start with would be a workbench. If you don't have a workbench, because they're easy to, at least my workbenches are easy to make, they're easy to customize, they're you don't have to be really fussy about everything fitting together perfectly, and nobody's going to see it but you. So you don't have to worry about it passing the test. And one other thing about your projects is don't worry so much about people noticing any defects, anything that you think you've done wrong. Nobody notices that stuff, seriously. There's flaws in every project I've made, but I don't go around telling people about them when I show them, hey, look at this cool project I made. But if you notice under here, I really screwed up that part. Nobody knows that stuff. Okay, did I get all of the oh wait, there's one more question. I did miss a couple here on Patreon. Sorry. Jack Evans. Hey Jack, it's good to see you. Jack's been a viewer of the show for a long time. I just made a small panel, edge gluing 3 boards. Despite keeping a close eye on it, one of the boards slipped, had that happen, making a ridge. I'm gonna sand it out unless you have a different suggestion. I'd like to hear about glue up techniques and generally how I recover from these inevitable boo-boos. Every project has boo-boos, and what Jack is talking about is he glued up 3 boards, which is a real common thing to do. You glue up 3 boards to make one big board. So you would glue like the edges of them like that. And what happens is when you're gluing those, the glue can slip, the clamp might not work, or might not clamp it correctly, and there'll be a slight overhang. I don't know, I can't really show that. But anyways, they wouldn't be completely flush, but that happens almost on all of mine, and I do exactly what you do, Jack. I take a sander and just lots and lots of sanding. Of course, if you have a planer and the board, your panel isn't too wide, just run it through the planer and that should take care of it. Of course, the problem with doing both of those is that you're going to be making your panel a little bit thinner. Another thing to be aware of is that furniture is, at least furniture made with solid wood, is not always flat. If you feel the top of a dresser, and it's kind of like historically this way, if you feel the top of like an antique dresser, it feels like this. It's wavy. It's not perfectly flat. So I think that we strive too much for perfection and forget the big picture. But I think you're on the right track. Just lots of sanding. That's the way I do it. Or if you have a hand plane, if that's your thing, go for it. What jigsaw? This is from Angel. What jigsaw blades do I recommend for the cleanest cuts? A finer tooth blade obviously will give you a cleaner cut, but it'll go slower. I should have turned off those notifications on my phone. That's that sound you're hearing. But also turn off the orbit feature on your saw, because that makes it either cuts faster, but it also makes the blade go kind of like this way, and that's also not good for a clean cut. So, and if check out, I have a video on jigsaws that should help you out there. I use the T-shank blades. If you can, get a saw that uses those T-shank blades. They're way better than those weird U-shaped ones. AMD Ham has another question. I like to recycle wood leftovers. I have a box of exotic wood dowel cutoffs. I'm trying to come up with something creative to do with them. Do I have any suggestions? Dowels seem to be overlooked as a main component for wood projects. That's interesting. Yeah, you're right. Have you done much with dowels? You know, I have a lot of dowels. I keep them up here on the top of this. There's a dowel. I've got all different sizes of dowels and cutoffs up there. But as far as using scraps of wood, let me show you what I did with mine. This is kind of dusty, but I just made an art piece. I took all those little cutoffs of different species of wood and just it was kind of fun. It was like making a little Tetris thing, trying to fit everything together. Do something like that. I think this is cool. I would hang that on my wall. Well, I do hang it on my wall in my shop. But I think it would actually kind of look cool in a room, especially if it was bigger like this. Like, dude, make it a statement piece. Illuminati Games. I like that name. He just says awesomeness. Well, thanks, Illuminati. Did you know Poppy is part of the Illuminati? See if any of you get that reference. Let's see. I have collected so many scrap wood. This is from Daniel. I have collected so many wood scrap and cutoffs. He needs ideas. Again, that was kind of relating back to the previous question. Make an art piece out of them. That's all I got. If anybody else has a better idea. Or don't let them get out of hand. Eventually you just got to throw away those scraps. They'll drive you crazy. And cool, we did it. Those were all the Patreon. I'm going to go over to Twitter now because I asked the same question over on Twitter. And let's see what kind of Twitter questions I can answer if I can find them. Sorry about the delay here. To talk amongst yourselves. Okay, here we are. 27. Oh, is it 27? No, I don't know how many it is. Okay, so I asked a question again on Twitter to give me your woodworking questions. I'll answer them all, and this is every woodworking question ever asked, ever. First one comes from RJH. I've always had a hard time making exact cuts. Always have a 16-inch gap here and there. Is this just practice, better tools, what's happening? Could be. It could be all of those things, or you might just be too critical on yourself. It depends upon the project. You know, if you're making something this big, a 16th inch gap is negligible for the most part. But if you're making a little box, a 16th inch is important. That's why I always think it's easier to make the bigger projects than smaller ones. But it also could be just the way your saw is calibrated and how you're cutting. Make sure that you double check your measurements, cut on, when you draw a line, make sure you're cutting on one side of the line or the other. That's probably a common error people make, is that you forget which side is going to be your keeper piece and which side isn't. So when you draw a line, if you cut down the center, you're going to be losing a 1/16 on each side of that line because your saw blade is 1/8 of an inch thick. And also keep in mind that all those measurements over the course of a project can add up and become bigger problems. Another thing is always cut pieces of wood when you can. Cut everything to size as you're building the project. Even though you can get a set of plans that has a cut list, it's tempting to just go, first thing I'm gonna do is cut all of the pieces to the project and be done with it. But avoid doing that because no project is ever gonna fit together exactly like they do in the plans made on SketchUp. Even my own projects, when I make them, I'm always having to modify the sizes of the wood that I cut. Giaco, whatever. Hey, Giaco. He asks, he has a painted wood door, he wants to get it plain, unpainted wood again. What's the best way to do this without acids? I'm glad you said that because one time I tried the same thing, and it might have been on our front door years ago, probably when we first moved here. And I tried that paint stripper you can buy, which is like, it's the most awful, nasty, caustic stuff. I would never recommend that again to anyone. You pour it on, it's like this gel, and it just eats away and then you've got to scrape off the old paint and the fumes, and it was horrible. So yeah, don't do that. The only other way I know is sanding. Lots and lots of sanding to get rid of paint. And to add to that, sometimes people ask me if something is stained, how do they get it back? If something is stained, I don't think you can get it back to its bare wood color because that stain, soaks into the wood, whereas paint's just a layer on top. Yeah, lots of sanding. And Rich W actually replied to him and said infrared heat might work. That's a good idea. A heat gun, try that. I always forget about my heat gun, and it's a handy tool to have. Tom wants to know, can you spend too much time on setting up your shop? I don't know, it's up to you. A lot of guys spend a lot of time in their shop just building shop stuff. Don't let that unless that's really what all you want to do is just kind of, cocoon in your shop, which is fine. Don't let building stuff in your shop prevent you from building things that everybody can enjoy, or gifts, or whatever kind of you want to build. He might have, can you spend too much on setting up your shop? I think he meant, can you spend too much money? I'm talking about too much time or something. I don't know. But can you spend too much money? Definitely. You can spend way too much money, at least in my opinion. Unless you're Money McMoney face, you probably don't have an unlimited source of funds. Keep your tools and everything modest as much as you can. Someday you may get to the point where you need upgrades, and then go for it. But if you're just starting out, you're not really going to know what those upgrades are that you need. Norbert Davis asks, what's the best way to connect 2x4s to make a workbench? I use screws. I use long, like 2.5-inch screws, same kind as I was showing before. Works out great. Justin, any tips for getting small scrap pieces of quality hardwood on the cheap? I don't always need the full board from most stores. I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't know. Most hardwood stores that sell, most lumber yards that sell hardwoods don't want to cut those boards down for you, and they don't have scraps, so you're kind of stuck with the full board. There might be other places that I just don't know. Oh, this is where I should have made up an answer, huh? I said I was going to make up answers if I didn't have an answer. I don't know. Craigslist. Try Craigslist. Jose asks, Steve, how do you make a scissor cut? We call them catres in Mexico. I don't know what a scissor cut is. Oh, here's where I can make up a question. How to make a scissor cut? Well, you do this. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Jose. I really don't know. Did any of you ever hear of a scissor cut? Not sure. I'm trying to think what that might be. I wonder if it's just like a jagged cut or something. Nick Gallagher asks, have you ever sawed the power cord of a circular saw with a circular saw? No, but I did that with a hedge trimmer one time. It was a corded hedge trimmer, and and when you hit those, they just go, and it makes a pop, and it might blow the circuit too. But I haven't done that on a circular saw. Joe Garcia. Hey, Joe. Joe's, he's local. Where do saplings come from? From sap, of course. Michael asks if the Oakland Raiders were a wood species, what species would they be? They would be hard ebony. Until, well, once they move to Las Vegas, they'll probably be like Purple Heart, maybe. That's fine, I don't know. I'm still miffed about this whole big Vegas move. John wants to know, can I use a battery-powered brad nailer when building simple furniture with glue and nails instead of one that needs an air compressor? Yeah, of course, a lot of people do that. Ryobi makes a good nailer that I've seen people use, battery-operated one. I haven't used it. My only problem with them is they look big. They look really bulky to use, and it might be difficult to get into some tight spaces with them. Whereas a nail gun with your compressor is usually pretty small. An actual woodworking question, he said. Oh, this is from Christopher. An actual woodworking question. I do not have a miter gauge for my table saw. Is my best solution to order a replacement or something else? Yeah, order a new one. I don't think you can really make a miter gauge effectively. John asks another question. If I already have the Ryobi table saw, that crummy one I was talking about, how can I make jigs for it with the non-standard miter saw? You know, I've been thinking about that because I have the miter, or I have that saw now, and I think maybe I'll make a video on how to make some sleds and jigs using those non-standard miter slots. It's the same slots that were on Craftsman table saws and probably Skills, probably some other low-end table saws, like super low-end table saws have those same kind of slots. So I think I'll make a video on that. I think it would be helpful. Will wants to know, what's your line in the sand for tools that can get away with being cordless versus corded? Just anything that you're going to use a lot, it's going to power down. I don't see a problem with most battery operated tools. Seem to last a long time these days on a charge. Probably the ones that'll get the most use from me would be my drill and impact driver. The trick there is to obviously make sure that you have an extra battery, one always charging, so that you can swap them out. But I've seen, you know, they have circular saws now you can get that are cordless, and I think it would work because, at least the way I use them, I don't make a whole lot of cuts using it. If I was on a construction site using it all day, that would probably not be a good solution, and I would get a corded version. The Onion Knight asks, any clever ideas for cutting large, clean, circular holes? Been working on some loudspeaker projects. Yeah, that's a good project for that. Yeah, use a router. You can, if you have a router, use router, straight bit, and make a base for your router. I don't have my router handy, it's in my table. Take the base off your router and just use a piece of plywood or something. Make a base for it. Let me do another demo here. Okay, so your router's going to set here. You're going to screw it onto any kind of a base. You're going to drill a hole, a screw here, and that's all there is to it. And then you screw this into your wood, and then you just go all the way around. You got a perfect hole. You want to make sure you clamp the wood down so that when that hole is released, it doesn't go flying. But it works out really well. I've done that before. RJH says he's used a rotary tool with a cutting bit held by a string or wire to a screw or nail in the center. That could work. Sean McDonald asks, what happens if I use Danish oil mix, which is boiled linseed and poly with mineral spirits, on something already stained? Will linseed soak in? Yeah. I think anything, if something is already stained, you can pretty much put anything on top of it. I'm pretty sure. He also asked, any tips for ripping boards? I was ripping shelves out of plywood for a shelf. As I went on, they got unsquare. You started with the factory edge. Yeah, you're starting with plywood. If you start with that plywood edge and you measure over, you put a straight edge on there and you make a cut, then your first shelf is perfect. But if it's just going back to that 1/16 of an inch thing asked earlier, but if that was slightly off, then your next one's going to be slightly off even more, and those will build up over time. I had really good luck with that Craig track saw. I know I made a sponsored video with it, but it's really cool. And I'm going to be using that more and more for making cuts on plywood, because you just drop it on there and make cuts. Unless you're talking about your table saw, making rip cuts on a table saw. If those aren't straight, check your fence, because your rip fence should be parallel with your blade. It's always worth double checking. Why is there an Olympic logo hanging in my shop? Oh, these. There's my Olympic logos. Whoa, it's got cobwebs on them. That was a project I made. I think it was for the Olympics, like the eight years ago. There's a video of this. It was a real challenge. The challenge was trying to get the wood to interlock, and I had all kinds of problems. Today I would probably approach this project a little differently. I ended up just super gluing it together because it was kind of hard, but I think that was for what was the Olympics before this last one? We had the 2016, 14, I think it was like the 2012 Olympics I made these for. It's been a long time. I really like the Olympics, though. I love both summer and winter Olympics. I get obsessed with them every time they come on. Okay. Did I get through them all? That was it. That was all the Twitter questions. Okay. Woohoo! We answered every woodworking question ever asked, ever. And I want to thank Jacob Hare for the super chat. That was really cool. He doesn't have a question or anything. He just left a super chat. So thank you for that. I know a lot of you asked questions on YouTube also, and I'll try to answer those next time. Because I think it's just too many here. It's just a barrage of quality answers to your quality questions. So for now, I think I'll go through your questions here, some of what I can, and then we'll wrap it up. Call her a day. And sorry for all of you who were asking questions earlier on the chat. I'm just going to go through kind of backwards and ask them. Steve, which is better for you, DeWalt or Bosch? I have no idea which brand is better. I have some DeWalt tools. I don't have any Bosch tools, so I can't really say. How about a Harbor Freight table saw? Is it worth the money? Again, I don't have any experience with it, but I've had people tell me Harbor Freight actually has pretty decent tools. I know they get kind of a bad rap, but it's pretty inexpensive and they're not that bad. What's the best finish for cornhole boards? You just wanted to hear me say cornhole. I think that was it was a George Carlin bit where he was talking about cornhole. So it just makes me giggle every time I hear cornhole. Best finish? I would just paint them. Isn't that what they're usually doing? Usually they have like sports teams logos or something on those. Those of you who don't know, cornhole is a game. It's a board, it has a hole in it, and then you toss like a bean bag or something and try to get it in. Paul from Ireland wants to know, what's my favorite kind of wood or lumber to make woodworking projects? For shop projects, I always use pine. If I'm going to go with hardwood projects, I almost always like cherry as my kind of go-to hardwood. I think it looks nice and it's fairly inexpensive, but hardwoods are always expensive. Okay, Philip says, hey Steve, love the show. I go to my local lumber store to get lumber cut. When I receive the cut, when I receive the cut wood long ways, I see a lot of teeth marks in the wood. Do you get this? If so, how do you solve it? Wow, I'm not really sure what that is going on there. I think that they need to, I would ask them about that. They shouldn't be, you shouldn't have teeth marks in the sawed wood. There might be some burn marks or something, I don't know. But I would check on that. By the way, if any of you don't have a truck and you want to buy lumber at Home Depot, and I'm sure Lowe's does this too, somebody posted, it might have been on Instagram the other day, that Home Depot now does 3 free cuts. So you can slice a piece of plywood in 3 pieces. They have one of those big panel saws, and I think that's a great way to go. You can actually fit a sheet of plywood into your car that way. And I wouldn't rely on those cuts to be perfect. I would, if you have those cuts, make sure you give them a little wiggle room and then finish it up at home. Can I use castor oil to finish a cutting board? I'm not sure. I didn't know you could still get castor oil. I guess so. Dead Alliance says he bought a table saw used for $50. Spent about $15 for an outfeed table. It's an old Rockwell, but it works. Yeah, you know, that's the way to go. If you've got the time to look for used saws, go for it. In a lot of cases, those saws are better quality than newer saws, but you may have to clean them up, sand them, get the rust off of them. You might have to put some oil in them or grease them so they operate better. But I think buying used tools is a great way to go. I think we live in, you know, the age where a phone is obsolete in 2 years, and so we kind of want to apply that to everything else, but tools really don't get obsolete. Jay Palin says, how much of the furniture in my house is made by you, and have I considered making absolutely everything by myself? A lot of it is made by me. I've got my TV stand, my credenza, my coffee table, my dining table, all end tables, lamp table and stand, nightstands in the bedroom, the bed itself in all 3 rooms. Pretty much all of the furniture in the only thing I haven't made is like my chair and the couch, you know, so I want those to be comfortable. And it was never a goal. It was just I started making these projects and adding them to the mix. Our furniture style is very eclectic. Eclectic is a nice way of saying it's just a hodgepodge. Okay, let me take a couple more of these and then we will wrap it up, guys. Let's see. Okay, this is an answer from Polisturkus. I'm not sure how I ought to say that, but it looks like he's answering somebody's question about jigsaw blades. And it looks like the question is how to prevent the blade from bending. And I think he has the right answer. He says he uses a cheap jigsaw from Harbor Freight. It works fine. Doesn't matter which jigsaw you have. If the material's too thick, the saw blade bends. That's pretty much true. And that's like one of the biggest drawbacks. It's like a caveat to using the jigsaw is be aware that that blade can flex. And the best solution is to take it slow, make your cuts as slow as you can, especially on curves. Straight cuts are usually pretty good without it flexing, but if you take a curve too fast on a jigsaw, that blade will just want to deflect out and you won't have that nice edge on your lumber. I think that's about it. What's the next project I'm working on from Mediocre Multimedia? I'll have a project video out next Friday. Right now I'm working on the Weekend Woodworker stuff. Don't forget, go to theweekendwoodworker.com But I'm working on projects for that right now, so that's 7 projects in that. And there's a table in there. I just made a workbench for that. But for next Friday, you know, I'm thinking about making, and this would be kind of like one of those self-indulgent projects that nobody would want to make, I need to make some sort of a display for medals that I get when I run races, you know, half marathons and stuff. Because I have a lot of those just hanging up, and I'd like to make something to kind of display those, but I don't know if people want to see that kind of stuff. I try to avoid those kind of projects. But if I include it in my art and design series, see, that kind of gives me the leeway because art is so subjective. That's all I got this week, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on the live feed. Without you, it would just be a feed or live, I don't know. Don't forget, check out theweekendwoodworker.com, download your free tool guide, check out those tools, and leave a comment there what do you think about that list. I think it's a pretty good list. I think you're going to like those tools as just a starting point. And I have a new regular project video next Friday. Again, don't know what that is. Don't forget to check out makerscare.org so you'll be up to date on when that fundraiser starts this fall. That's all I've got for now. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next week.